Good morning. I'll call this meeting to order. It's the regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation Public Works Committee. This day, September 27, 2016. I'm Councilmember Reich. I'll be chairing the meeting. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Yang, Council Vice President Glidden, Councilmember Palmisano, and Councilmember Bender. We are a quorum, and we'll continue with today's agenda that we have before us. We have 18 items in total. We have a public hearing and a discussion item. The remainder are consent. I will go through the consent items. Any member can pull them for further conversation if they wish. Item 2 is the Riverine Emergency Management Model Software Agreement Amendment with Pomerleau Laboratories. Item 3 is agreement with Outfront Media LLC for paid advertising within city-owned parking facilities and skyways. Item 4 is an amendment with the ABC Parking Ramp Management Agreement with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Item 5 is the Federal Highway Safety Improvement Program funding agreements with a series of actions there within. Item 6 is the 4th Street North, 4th Street South Reconstruction Project Engineering Design Services Contract with Bolton and Menck Incorporated. That item we refer to Ways and Means. Item 7 is the Minneapolis Street Naming and Address Standards Policy Update. Item 8 is the temporary easement agreement to establish an L alley at 43rd Street West and Upton Avenue South. Item 9 is the St. Anthony Parkway Bridge Project Easement Extension, Railroad Agreement, and Parking Restrictions. That'll be referred to Ways and Means. Item 10 is the Van Weyt Memorial Boulevard right-of-way dedication. Item 11 is the Zombie Pub Crawl Block Event Permit for October 15th, 2016. I think the city must be one of the top places for zombie enthusiasts by now, if not on a per capita basis. Item 13 is the sidewalk repair and construction assessment, setting public hearing for October 25th, 2016. Item 14 is a snow and ice removal public sidewalk assessment. That public hearing is set for October 25th. Item 15 is the bid for Fiddly Softening Plant Recarbonation Improvements Project. That'll be referred to Ways and Means. Item 16 is the bid for revised signal systems and pedestrian curb ramp improvements, referred to Ways and Means. Item 17 is the bid for preformed cellular concrete with the company and the amount listed. That'll be referred to Ways and Means. And the final consent item is a bid for pedestrian countdown timers. And that also is a low bid. Committee members wish to pull anything for further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Dissenting name. We move the consent items forward. We can now go to the first and only public hearing. Good morning, Director Hutchinson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'll introduce Andrew Carlson to introduce this topic.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and council members. My name is Andrew Carlson, and I'm the project manager for Special Service Districts. I was just here before you at the last committee meeting to present 6 of our Special Service Districts. Those we refer to as our 428A districts, and that name comes from the state statute which allows for their creation. Today we'll be looking at the Uptown, Dinkytown, Central Avenue, Eat Street, Stadium Village, Lowry Hill, 48th in Chicago, and Linden Hill Special Service Districts, and they're seeking approval of their proposed services and service charges. We refer to these 8 districts as our legacy districts due to the fact that they were formed under different state statutes, but also due to their long existence and well-established branding. Names like Dinkytown, Central Avenue, Eat Street. That placemaking is all part of what the service district has to offer in terms of the continuations of those commercial neighborhoods. So what did we do? So back in June, Public Works staff met with the district advisory boards to recommend the services, prepare estimated budgets, and review their assessment methodologies for the coming year. These service charges would be collected in the 2017 real estate taxes in the same manner as special assessments. Each affected property owner was mailed a notice of public hearing with the service charge amount 10 days in advance of the public hearing. With that, we have shown here, it's not really in focus, but again, just kind of highlighting the fact that we have numerous special service districts throughout the entire city, and obviously in the process and discussions with commercial property owners and other stakeholders in creating more districts as well. So that work definitely continues. Staff therefore recommends recommendation. Staff therefore recommends passage of the resolution approving special services, the cost estimates, service charges, and the list of service charges for 2017 for the previously stated special service districts, and directing the city engineer to proceed with the work. That concludes my presentation, and I am more than happy to answer any questions.
Any questions per the presentation? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
I will now open the public hearing, and this is the public hearing for the special service districts as described in the presentation. Anyone sign in? Anyone wish to come forward? Anyone wish to come forward? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and approve the passage of the resolution approving the special service districts cost estimates, service charges, and the list of services that will be provided in the areas listed. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Dissenting nay, that carries. We can now move to the last item on our agenda, which is a discussion item of some significance regarding a 20-year street funding plan update.
Who will be presenting on this item, and also, there we go. And I'd like to take a moment, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, council members, to introduce Jennifer Hager and also to offer a thank you to Jennifer and her team, as well as the members of Public Works who have also contributed and reviewed to this process. Jennifer and the Transportation Planning and Programming team have been working since April on a robust process and the development of criteria, which is the basis of today's presentation. So thank you very much to the team, and I will turn it over to Jennifer now.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. I'm Jennifer Hager with Transportation Planning and Programming, here to talk to you today about where we're at with the 20-year street funding plan. I'd just like to start with just a really quick thank you once again to the leadership here at the city for approving this ordinance and giving us this great opportunity. It's been a very exciting time over the summer to be able to work on this, and we've been very, very busy. I also want to start off by acknowledging some key staff and thanking some key staff that are not able to be here with us today. They are in Seattle representing Minneapolis at the NACTO conference. So Nathan Koster and Kathleen Mayel with Transportation Planning and Programming. I also want to thank our consultant team with Kimley Horn and Associates, who is here today helping to support me in this presentation. They have been instrumental in getting us to where we are today with this work. Real briefly today, just going to review the timeline and what we've been doing, our public engagement to date, where we're at with our project selection process and criteria, and then our ongoing work after today. As you know, the ordinance was passed in April, and we began working immediately. In the month of May, the first month of our work, our focus was primarily on information gathering and data assembly. Largely, that was meeting with other utility companies, internal and external agencies that might have capital projects in the city, and learning what plans they had that we could coordinate with, what data they had that they could share with us, so that we could bring all of that into our process and our analysis. Our consultant team also did some research across the nation about what other agencies were doing, what criteria was being used across the nation, how often did that criteria come up, and what data sources were in the background supporting that criteria. In June, we engaged with the city's Office of Equity and Inclusion and the Department of Neighborhood and Community Relations to develop a framework for community engagement, public engagement on the equity component of this work. And the months of July and August were spent carrying out that plan. And in the background, we also started drafting our own criteria. In September, we pulled all of that together, and that brings us here today at the very, very beginning of our work. This is just the beginning. This is a 20-year plan. The world will change over the next 20 years, and we must change with it. And to that end, we have set this plan up so that we can track, evaluate, report, and continue to refine as we move through and progress on this. Our work so far has been guided by two overarching principles. One, that our plan would be data-driven, and two, that we would be able to seize and create opportunities with this plan. How did we do that? As defined in the ordinance, we developed a criteria-based system with a focus on racial and economic equity. We know that we need to maintain our overall street pavement condition, and we know that we want to continue to review and refine to be able to report and to be able to continue to incorporate feedback from the community as we go forward. Quick summary of our public engagement efforts to date. We've only completed our initial phase of public engagement. We started by identifying a targeted working group. These were folks known in the community to already be engaged in discussions surrounding equity. We brought in an external facilitator. He really helped us structure these meetings and facilitate these meetings. He set clear expectations for participants. And we worked along the way to adapt based on feedback that we were getting. So we changed our process. We added a public open house. We added an online survey. We reached out to the pedestrian and bicycle advisory committees, as well as the Minneapolis Advisory Committee on People with Disabilities. Through all of this work, we focused on the same three consistent questions. First, what does equity mean relative to city transportation? What inequities exist in the transportation system today? And what outcomes would demonstrate success? Our process did present us with some very rich feedback, and we were able to use that to help us define and weight our criteria. We were able to pull some common themes. Essentially, folks were focused on how is the transportation system used, what modes are available, and how could community engagement be more equitable going forward. Our work also resulted in the identification of some opportunities that went beyond project selection criteria. And Public Works is continuing to have ongoing discussions about these items as well, so that they are not left by the wayside. These were revolving around things like how can we better reflect demographics and use patterns in our work? How can we engage with the voices that we do not typically hear from? Are there ways to address economic impacts of a project or disparities in amenities and services across the city? And how can our workforce better reflect the community that it serves? Through all this work, we developed a project selection process that is represented by this graphic. It is data-driven, and it allows us to seize and create opportunities. The data-driven part of this work is 90% of the effort. It's asset condition plus equity, and it gives us a list of potential projects. The last 10% of the work is a qualitative lens that we apply to that output, and it allows us to look at, is this the right fix at the right time? Are there synergies that should be grasped and seized to create opportunities? Are we addressing known city priorities and goals? And that allows us to develop a 5-year capital improvement program. So our criteria includes both asset condition, which is focused on the physical condition of the street, and also equity, which we split into 2 different subcategories: community demographics and uses and mode. Asset condition is comprised of a familiar measure to you, pavement condition index, but it also looks at things like safety, which would be crash data, not just for vehicles, but for all modes, and utility needs. That is bringing together the condition of our infrastructure that we can't see underneath the surface, along with that we can see above. Community demographics. Here we looked at some geographic criteria. Areas where there's a non-white majority, shown here in yellow. Areas with low-income populations, shown here in blue. Yellow plus blue equals green, so there's also the overlapping areas. Previously known as RCAPs, or Racially Concentrated Areas of Poverty, now known as ACP 50s, Areas of Concentrated Poverty with a non-white majority. They're the same thing, different acronym. In addition to this geographic criteria, we also looked at vehicle availability and potential users. Potential users are looking at population density and things like regional destinations, educational institutions, job centers. Where are the people and where are they trying to get to and back again? Then uses and mode. This is where we take a look at our modal plans, plans of our transit provider, existing users of the system, and overlay all of that with our recently adopted Complete Streets policy and the modal hierarchy that is embedded within it. That gives us a list of potential projects, and then we do our qualitative screening. Are there other nearby projects that will also be under construction? Can we combine things to reduce disruption or cost? Is this the right fix at the right time? Have we addressed known city priorities and goals? And do other agencies or utilities have projects that can be coordinated? Data-driven, seizing and creating opportunities. This is our first attempt at developing this criteria. This is what was used to develop the amended 5-year capital program that will be presented on October 6th to the Ways and Means Committee. It's just the beginning. We fully expect that we will evaluate how this is working and refine it as we go forward. One of our first process improvements that I want to plug here is automated pavement data collection. That's going to be happening in the next couple weeks here. We have the vans arriving. They will drive the entire city within a month and a half or so this fall, and all of our pavement condition data will be new and current. And there will be other ongoing efforts that we're looking at as we go forward to improve our data sets or expand upon our data sets, continue to engage with the community and incorporate their feedback and refine this work as we go forward. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will stand for any questions that the committee may have.
And not only will we be updating our data, but we're going to make it more granular in terms of PSI, because right now we've got conditions that are kind of bundled in sort of patchworks throughout communities, and that doesn't always get to the actual condition in some respects. So we'll be able to get granular with these new data sets.
Mr. Chair, yes, that is the case. We're already starting to do some of that, and our ability to do that will be improved once this new data is collected.
So it would be very important for other infrastructure alignment, because pipes that are in greater need don't happen in patches, they happen linearly as well. So, Council Vice President Glidden.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I had some questions about the criteria, and then I had some bigger questions about the process, and maybe some comments about that too. So just some things as I'm trying to kind of understand what is the criteria, and I'm kind of looking through the presentation. I'm not sure if that's like an exact list, or you were trying to give us a flavor of what then is articulated in maybe a little bit different looking list that you have. I mean, I can understand the asset condition. It's the other piece I'm a little bit unclear on how that affects your selection. But I just had some other things that I know sometimes we've been talking about, and I was curious if these things make their way into the selection criteria at all, or how you're analyzing some of these things like pedestrian issues and stuff like that. So the three things that I wrote down were connectivity. So this is something that we have been talking about, in particular relating to North Minneapolis, where for some neighborhoods, there's not as much connectivity to other neighborhoods. And that's a little bit driven by what's the second thing that I've been thinking of, which is impact of freeway crossings through our neighborhoods. And then the third thing that I was thinking of was the placemaking, which I think, again, kind of goes to the kind of pedestrian experience and the aesthetics that come along with opportunities created by major street reconstruction. And that is a very big piece of what happens with the reconstruction project, is how you're able to take a place that is not very attractive and see what are our opportunities to make that more connected to the place around it, the businesses, the residents, and all that kind of thing. So I wonder if you can respond to any of those items in terms of how they may or may not affect project selection criteria.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Glidden. Um, With connectivity, we do look at whether that's through the roadway itself or other modes that might have like a trail connection or something that's not directly linked to a roadway. That is incorporated in our criteria in a couple of different places. And specifically looking at the pedestrian as a mode, we have that incorporated into asset condition, but also in the uses and modes category. One data set that we want to improve upon going forward is collection of the condition of our sidewalks. We have really, really good data about the sidewalk intersections, the corners, the ramps, but we don't necessarily have as thorough of data about the sidewalk in between and along a corridor. And so that is something that we want to collect and have available to us in the near future. So it would look at things like the width of the sidewalk. Does it align with Access Minneapolis and the pedestrian realm recommendations that are contained therein? Is the cross slope compliant with design guidance? Are there obstructions? Those types of things. We want to collect that data and use it. So we were not able to use that in this particular iteration, but it is something we're looking at collecting in the very near future and that we would be able to have available to us. So when we get into placemaking, that's something that would be something that we'd be aware of based on that condition information in the project selection process and would be considered then in the project development process with the community engagement. What should that pedestrian realm look like when the street is rebuilt?
And what about the freeway crossings?
Freeway crossings are not specifically mentioned in our criteria. It would be similar to our pedestrian realm. So if the freeway crossing is causing a barrier because the sidewalk width is too narrow, because the ramps are non-compliant, because it's not lit and it should be, that would be captured through other criteria, but it's not specifically called out as freeway crossing barriers as a criteria itself.
Okay. Well, I just want to say that the freeway, we have a lot of freeway crossings in the city of Minneapolis. I have to say, almost like 201, they're like super problematic for how you're able to engage around those intersections safely as anything other than in your vehicle and also in the vehicle, frankly, too. And so I kind of wish we had a bigger picture way to start thinking about these freeway crossings because they are so significant to the experience of the city around the freeway, including how we develop economically, how we're safe as pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicle users, how buses can maneuver around them and use them. So I just wanted to put that out there. The second thing I wanted to ask about is I need a little bit more from you on how the engagement process will work from here on out and how you will re-engage in the project selection criteria on an ongoing basis. Because I kind of heard you say that we have the project selection criteria and then we'll think about engagement about other elements. And I thought I had heard in a previous meeting that the project selection criteria was something we were, as a city, going to continue to evaluate as time goes on. And I'll just, mention, I know that you did make some efforts on a challenging timeline to think through engagement. And I think this is a challenge for Public Works that is common throughout the city and how we're trying to respond to needs to do deeper and better community engagement and then think how that engagement actually meaningfully impacts the work as opposed to just, doing it for the sake of doing it. So that is a little bit more of how you fit that into your timeline and figure out what are meaningful questions and so forth. When we're talking about equity and race equity, not only is our Public Works staff, primarily white, but so is our pedestrian advisory committee and our bicycle advisory committee and our disability advisory committee, and a lot of these set groups that do bring great experience, but don't bring the experience of connecting the city to people of color and how those voices are fully impactful in the process. And so I think that really is something for us to take on, how we're thinking that through as part of the process, and weaving that in to kind of deepen our ability to do that better.
Mr. Chair, Council Member, I am unable today to give you a detailed plan of how we're going to do that engagement, but we know that we need to loop back. And our thought was that we would loop back with the targeted group that we were working with this summer and start with them. This is where we landed. Thank you for the input so far. Thank you for your efforts to help us on a very challenging timeline so far. How can we do better? How can we bring our outreach out to the community? We're looking for ways to go out to the community rather than ask the community to come to us. What can we do better? We want to start with that group to really define that plan and get their buy-in and their assistance so that we can go forward with something that will be more meaningful and will be more equitable, and that we can have that buy-in and support with at the end.
Thank you.
And just as a piggyback, I think hoping I'm not reading into it, that we can learn a lot from doing things. We're going to have a whole body of work that we can reflect on, collections of projects, input through the normal input processes, maybe some reflections on those or some pullback analysis of how the process and community input did impact a project. And then you stack that up over citywide, over 2 or 3 years of projects, you get a lot of data to reflect on. So it won't always just be the big picture in the abstract. It'll actually be buttressed by some real world experience, and the results of that experience, I think, can be as telling as any contemplation that we could come up with in the abstract. So, and I think that's an understanding that may not come out from this presentation, but I think the department is looking forward to that part of the process too.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Council Member Yang, and then Bender, then Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I'm looking at this 20-year streets funding plan process and criteria, I guess the question I have is, how does this impact the assessments that will or may happen, because of any number of projects that are going to happen, such as a streets project?
Mr. Chair, Council Member, we do recognize that street assessments do come with these projects. That was part of our conversation with the targeted working group over the summer. I do know that there have been some conversations going on at a policy level as well about that question. But as of right now, our policy is that we do levy assessments with our street projects, and that is what we're working from as of now.
Okay, and with that in mind, I mean, let's say we're talking about the. Give me just a second here. We have this map on RCAPs or ACP 50s and all that stuff. I mean, is the conversation getting to the point where we may be looking at, let's say, discounting assessments based on RCAPs or ACP 50s, or what are we thinking about with regards to that? And if that's too preliminary, I mean, I can stop my question and just, I guess, be a part of the process later on.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Yang, we appreciate your question, and it's certainly been a topic of discussion among our team. I will repeat what Jennifer noted, is that we are working under the assumption of the current policy. However, we are aware that additional questions will arise, and we will be talking about this in greater detail as the plan moves forward, and it will be undoubtedly one of the topic areas that will be revisited as we move forward this year and the next and the next. So we look forward to continuing that discussion with you.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may add on that, some of the high-level thinking, we have to understand the utility and our universal approach to our assessments as a key consideration. Another consideration is Is this something we deal with on an aggregate level or an individual level? And then I think another consideration is significant adjustments in how we fund these projects could reverse some of the gains we told the public we made by making this appropriation for a new standard of service. So I think those are the three big things that are in the pot, but the conversation is very new, and I'm glad you're taking interest in it. Councilmember Bender?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate having this presentation when it's still at kind of a high enough level that we can help guide the work. So I wanted to acknowledge that it's still at that kind of high level. I wondered, so I guess one of my questions is, are we thinking of this funding really to be focused only on resurfacing and reconstruction projects? Or is it open to more targeted safety kinds of improvements, like at freeway crossings or complex intersections, for example?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender, thanks for the question. That did come up quite a bit over the summer as well. Right now, the criteria is really set up to focus on street projects, whether it be resurfacing or reconstruction. There's a whole other component of our capital improvement program that looks at bridges and traffic signals and lighting and other targeted improvements like specific bicycle or pedestrian infrastructure projects. We have in the past used criteria on those particular projects as well, and we still have that criteria. It needs to be refined and go through the same kind of process that we did to develop the street paving criteria that we have before you today. So the answer to your question is we will still have those targeted improvements, and we do still look at those through a criteria-based lens, and we'll work to try and make that lens very compatible with what we have developed for the street paving projects. But we found in the past that the criteria isn't one and the same, that it doesn't work to put a bicycle infrastructure project through the same criteria as a paving project. And so it's a little bit different.
I suspected that was the case, and I think that makes sense. I do want to note, I think that the number one question or complaint or feedback I get from constituents in my office is about pedestrian safety and traffic calming on neighborhood streets. And so I think some of that will come through in this program, but I also see a need for us to continue to build on the pedestrian master plan. And there are other plans to figure out how we can better systematically address those neighborhood streets, as well as the very busy complex intersections like Hiawatha and Lake, or the ones in my ward, 31st and Hennepin, 31st and Lindale, Lake and Hennepin, Lake and Lindale. I get a lot of comments and questions and feedback about those intersections. And so I know you have a full plate with this, but I think as we're thinking about having this major system-wide investment that's really focused on pavement quality, it makes me think that now we may have pots of funding that could become available for a citywide approach to these complex intersections or other kind of targeted system approaches. So I just wanted to note that, and you can comment or just leave it there and follow up.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender, just a quick comment. We are aware of that need, and we have been looking very closely at the pedestrian master plan as we prepare ourselves for an update to Access Minneapolis. The pedestrian master plan has a lot of problem statements, but the solutions are not clearly identified in that plan. And so in order to be poised to do some of these improvements that need to be done or take advantage, seize and create opportunities, we need to understand what those solutions should be or want to be in those complex intersections. And so we're beginning that work. We're starting to look at those more closely. We're working with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee as well to have them help us identify their priority locations and where we should be focusing, so that as these pots of money become available or we can do something with the roadway reconstruction project, we know what the right thing to do is.
Yeah, I know there's some transliterating from problem to solution going on as we speak, is my understanding. That's a parallel conversation, so, but urgent nonetheless. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the presentation and getting to see this work and how far it's come already in a shorter time. And so It looks great, and I'm interested in seeing where it will lead as it moves forward. I just wanted to note that I think that qualitative screening phase is going to be pretty critical and what exactly that means. And people are going to want to know there's some kind of objective criteria, or maybe there's actually opportunity for input and to participate in the screening. And I'm sure council offices included, but also community, and see where that goes. It also made me think about the importance of our CLIC, Capital Long Range Improvement Committee, and that they're going to have to kind of understand the vetting or the scoring that happened within Public Works to get there. And I noticed they weren't included on the community engagement over the summer. That makes sense. They're not meeting over the summer necessarily. But the thought was, well, this might be an opportunity to even bring in some of the CLIC members to help understand the process better and give input on what they think could help go into the evaluation of these kind of projects. Also appreciated the idea of maybe we could also use a similar process, but not the same, for the smaller projects that we're looking at to understand better. I was wondering if you'd talked to the NCR department or the coordinator's office. I know that they're trying to start a new group to help with community engagement, kind of just a roundtable. I think you can go in with what your problem or your issue is and get some great advice. Did you have a chance to meet with them, and did they help with this?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Council Member, our work this summer was guided by both the Office of Equity and Inclusion and NCR. And so we are fully engaged with them and will continue to be engaged with them going forward. So the answer to your question is yes.
Excellent. I love that kind of, collaboration between divisions and departments, and I'm glad to hear that new initiative was helpful in this process. I guess the last thing I just wanted to note is I've been intrigued by our uniform assessment project and the way we fund construction projects all the time that I've been here, and wondered if it's the right way to do it or not. The issue with me, there's a couple issues, but one, it sort of makes sense and it seems fair on some level, but also in a way it is kind of a regressive way of doing taxation too. And I've always been curious about what do the other cities do, what's really effective. And so I was interested when Councilmember Yang kind of brought that up. And maybe I think it's a challenging discussion, but it would be an interesting one to have and review that, and willing to participate in it, recognizing it's a little bit separate from this whole process too. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments per the presentation, which is an update of some significant work that's been accumulated to date, but also it's really about the work moving forward. This is the public really listened to us when we quantified what they've been telling us. There's a great and profound need out there. And what our quantitative analysis showed wasn't they were right in the here and now, but they were even more right, if you projected it out into the future. Our asset management sort of scope really showed some need. And this is to address that need. And clearly, it's not going to completely get the job done. We actually had a larger need that was identified, but I think this puts us in a better place down the road, so to speak, when we get to that point. And of course, we'll be judged by that moment. I'll also say the comments about public input and processes moving forward is great. A lot of that has been imbued in this, and there's a sense of ready, get everything set up, aim, make sure we have the right frameworks, and then fire. It's go time. It's time to get projects done, and people should see the work. But what we've said here is that we will continue to aim, and a lot of that information will be with continued outreach, continued input, and then actually the data of the work we've done when we've actually created what really isn't a new program, but a new level of service citywide. And so I think that's a new era for us, and I look forward to all that work. And if anything from this conversation, because there's a lot of things that kind of move from the core activity out into some very significant and real things that are our priorities as a biomatter policy, we might have to do another reappropriation of funds to get even more work done, particularly when you think about all the things that are under the street that are also old and need attention. So sorry for the additional opining up here, but I just wanted to make that comment. Seeing none, I will move to receive and file the presentation that we have before us. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.